My name is Matthew Magera. I am a freshman chemical engineering major at the University of Notre Dame. I have two older brothers that came through McQuaid also, class of 2011 and 2012, I believe. So really my search process started when they were looking for colleges. I was kind of dragged along, only being in sixth grade. I didn't really, absorb all the stats or get the full feel of a lot of these schools. But I knew, I got the sense of these schools. I got the sense of which ones felt right for me and which ones, I just didn't. So I guess I kind of had a jump start on that because I could already pick through some of the schools that really resonated with me before I even had to start thinking about schools. And when I did think about schools, when I did try to sift through the opinions of the schools I'd seen and some research on some ones that I hadn't, I decided that what really mattered to me was not only, academic qualifications, especially my major, but also the sense of community and the reputation and kind of the network that the school had. So I ended up looking at a couple schools. I only applied to 4, and I only got into 2. So definitely don't. I guess it would have been nicer to have more options, but ultimately I'm very satisfied with where I am. If there was any specific advice I would give, I would say definitely, as Seamus said, go visit. And when you visit, trust your gut. The other school I got into, I went to visit, and it just didn't feel right with me. It was higher ranked than Notre Dame for my major, even for most of all the other engineering disciplines, but it just didn't feel like a place where I could call home, as Seamus said. And the other thing I would say is don't get caught up in the numbers. Obviously GPA and standardized test scores are important, but I was in the field house, and one of the questions one of the kids asked me about Notre Dame was, what's their median SAT score? And I was like, you can look that up online, and I'm not going to say that number's not important, but that shouldn't be what you look for in a school. And certainly one thing to keep in mind is when they post that median grade range, 25% of the people are below that. So, don't let the numbers make the decision for you.
Several of you talked about other schools that you applied to. Would any of you be willing to share the list of schools you applied to? Okay, so let's start with you.
I got a short list. I applied to Stanford and Northwestern, did not get into either, and I got into Notre Dame and Georgia Tech.
Okay.
I applied to the University of Tennessee, St. Bonaventure, West Virginia, Clemson, and Ohio University.
I applied to Providence, Fordham, Loyola Maryland, Loyola Chicago, Villanova, and Boston College.
I applied to Marquette University, Xavier University, University of Rochester, College of the Holy Cross, and Boston College.
I applied to Boston College and Georgetown Early Action, and then regular decision, UPenn and Northwestern.
I applied to, obviously, College of the Holy Cross, Georgetown, Notre Dame, Bowdoin, Villanova, and John Carroll.
It's actually perfect, because now we're ending up with we're going to start with our specific questions. So Riley's question that we've got for him is, we'd like him to kind of talk about how he ended up at Holy Cross.
Yeah, so this also kind of segues into the last thing that McGearis talked about, which was SATs. So Holy Cross was not my first choice, but I like to say that in hindsight it should have been, because it is a great fit and I am incredibly happy there. Originally, the two schools that I really wanted to go to were Georgetown and Notre Dame. But the problem was with my SAT score. So I had my 4 years in high school. I had a good GPA, like mid to high 90s. I tried to stay involved and do as much as I could. But that one day, well, actually 2 days that I took the SAT, I just didn't do well. I was generally not a good test taker. But in doing some research online, there was a very small percentage that said, you know, sometimes they'll see over that if you have a great resume, if your essays are good, and if you have good recommendations. So I was like, you know, screw it, maybe we'll see what happens. And what happened was I got waitlisted from Georgetown, denied from Notre Dame, and I applied to I applied to 7 or 8 schools, and I got into 2 of them, which was very surprising for me. And for a while, I was pretty, I was pretty hurt about that. But I went and I spent a night and a day at Holy Cross, had a great time, and this was during a period that I was waitlisted at Georgetown. So I was still trying to keep my grades up. I even wrote a letter there. Actually, hello, Mr. Allen. Mr. Allen helped me with it. And then I got the letter back, and they said, you know, off the wait list, you're denied. But that was how my application process went. And like I said at the beginning, though, was not my first choice, but in hindsight, it should have been. And that's because, although it's corny, I honestly think that, you know, you end up where you're supposed to go. And I did not know that Holy Cross was going to be such a great fit for me. It really does feel like a bigger McQuaid, and I love it. But I would say, as Seamus did, if you go and spend a day there, go to classes, spend a weekend there, spend like a Friday, Saturday there, and just see how the vibe is with the kids, because that's kind of an intangible thing that you don't see on Naviance or, you know, in statistics. Because if I had known ahead of time what it was going to be like at Holy Cross, I never would have even applied to Georgetown or Notre Dame. And I say that completely sincerely. So, yeah.
Thanks, Ryan. So Patrick, at a Jesuit school, just a little bit about maybe what some similarities or differences, but we also want you to talk a little bit about this meeting and balancing maybe the social expectations, and literally on my cheat sheet I have in parentheses party, with the academic expectations. It's a whole new world, a world of independence. How is that going for you?
Right. So during my search, like I said, going to a Jesuit university was pretty big for me. I really enjoyed my time at McQuaid, like the campus ministry, the retreat programs, and the service opportunities that we had. And all of that at Georgetown is very similar. We have all of those same opportunities. The retreats, there's a cool one coming up, and then next semester that I'm interested in. It's geared towards students that have been on retreats before. It's like a Catholic Ignatian retreat, so I'm excited for that. And there's a lot of, at the beginning of each semester, there's a chance for you to start your own organizations for service. And I do tutoring right now, so I'm enjoying that. And then just one of my friends is involved with campus ministry. He's a Eucharistic minister. So all those same opportunities that we had at McQuaid are still there, just to get involved outside of the classroom. And then in the classroom, I found it's similar to my experience here, because here all the teachers wanted us to like develop critical thinking skills, and at Georgetown it's the same feel with you're constantly being challenged to form your own opinions and asked about what you think is going on in the world. So I thought that was important, like applying the classroom knowledge to things outside of the class. And then for the second part of the question, I think it's a good fit for me socially. There's not any, I liked that there weren't fraternities on campus. I thought that gave me an opportunity to meet different kinds of people, and that didn't dominate the social scene. So I think it's been a good fit for me socially. Definitely students are working really hard during the week. It's a demanding school, but they definitely want to go out with their friends and have fun on the weekends, so I felt like that's been a good fit. I've found that we have so much more free time than we did in high school, so that's been great. But during the golf season, I'm a little busier, which makes schoolwork, my time's more structured, so there's more of a focus on getting my schoolwork done. But during the off season, which we just had, it's been great. I had more time to spend with my friends, and I think it's a good balance between the social expectations and
So I'm going to begin by saying I never thought of myself as one of those kids who needed to get away from his family. I really do have a pretty good family relationship, and like I genuinely get along with most of them. But I think I'm only bring that up because that's important to know. Because I think a lot of kids really think they need to get away, but I think you'll get very, very surprised when you actually do get away. And I'll come back to that in a second. But in the end, in my college search, I came down to 2 schools, and it was basically a decision on money. And the 2 schools were Marquette University and University of Rochester. So I had the option between the school that was the farthest away from home or the school that was literally 5 minutes away from where we are right now. And at the time I was like, it doesn't really matter to me, I'm going to go where the better deal is. And I ended up being rather surprised at the adjustment. I didn't think it was going to be a huge deal for me. And to be quite honest, in the grand scheme of things, it probably hasn't been a huge deal for me. But it actually kind of, you do realize it pretty quick. I realized very quickly that I was no longer on the East Coast and I was in the Midwest. And that might sound strange to some of you, but like if you haven't lived in the Midwest, then I guess I don't know how to explain it, but it is different living in the Midwest. For better and for worse. There's a lot of really good things about living in the Midwest, and there are also, like for example, nightly news comes on at 5 o'clock instead of 6 o'clock. But there are, at the same time, I didn't, because I was so far away and traveling is expensive, like flights are $400 in like off times. Like for me to fly home at Thanksgiving would have been $600. I didn't anticipate coming home until Christmas. But by the time Thanksgiving rolled around, I really, really was ready to go home. So I was like, Mom, can I please come home for Thanksgiving? And she was like, yeah. And so she bought me a train ticket. And in the grand scheme of things, you know, it ended up being a 12-hour train ride, but like it's not as far away as it seems. So you get out there and you're like, oh, I'm going to handle this. And then you get like a month and a half in and you're like, oh, it's a little bit more difficult than I thought it was going to be. You know, I don't have any family out there or anything. Like if you get sick, you're stuck. Like that's where you are. And so I guess recommendations would be find things to keep you busy so you're not constantly worrying about things that are going on at home or being so far away from your friends that you've worked so hard to build up over the years, and suddenly you're plunked into a situation where you're very far away from everybody else. I think the closest McQuaid grad I have is either in Chicago or Madison, and that's not like very close. Like there's nobody from my class at Marquette with me, so it's like a pretty clean slate for me. And I think in that respect, that was something I was not ready for. But the adjustment is slowly happening. But to kids who are going, yeah, I think just don't be so quick to be like, oh, I can't wait to get away from my parents, because I think you'd be surprised that once you're there, how different it is.
The end of your answer actually was a great segue into Shane's question. There is a huge, I think, difference between graduating from McQuaid at what I call like the top of the food chain in many ways. Feeling comfortable in your classes, you're big men on campus, you're seniors, you're leaving here feeling pretty comfortable. So what happens when all of a sudden you are at the lower end of the totem pole, socially, academically, maybe as freshmen in your classes? How has that been transitioning from being a senior in high school to becoming a freshman in college in several ways? Socially, getting to know new people, joining school activities, especially because retention is a big issue. They say that a lot of times people don't connect with their school, and a lot of times it has to do with people kind of holing up in their rooms and not really getting involved. So how has that helped you, or what were ways maybe the school helped you do that?
Yeah, it was definitely a huge adjustment. You know, going from 6 years of McQuaid, knowing everybody in my class, having really tight relationships and bonds with each and every single one of the members of my class, and then going from a university with 5,000 kids and nobody from McQuaid, one person from Rochester in my class. So it was weird at first. It was a huge adjustment. But, so like at McQuaid, when I came to McQuaid, I knew a good amount of people, but I wanted to know more. Part of me, I wanted to get to know everybody, be friendly with everybody. So I got involved at McQuaid. I went into volleyball, I played baseball, and I joined a bunch of different clubs. So I wanted to kind of do the same thing at Providence. So actually starting out, I got to school a week early for a program called FaithWorks. It was a service and retreat type
ordeal that lasted a week, and I got to meet a really good core group of 40 incoming freshmen, and I've stayed close with them. It's not that I'm isolated with them. None of them are my best friends, but I still hang out with them. I'm still friends with them, and that was a good segue into college because there's so many different personalities, so many different types of people. Whereas McQuaid, I think we were all kind of similar. Like a lot of us thought the same way. Obviously, there was difference in opinions and such, but we were all the same because we had all gone through the same school for 4 to 6 years. We all knew each other well. You get to this school of 5,000 and you know a handful of people. So the best way to get integrated is to get involved. That's where you're going to meet people. That's where you're going to meet the people that share the same interests as you, and that's where you're going to make your friends. So I think once you get to school as a freshman, first you have to know your place. As a senior, like, you are the big man on campus. You kind of think you control the school, but obviously you don't really. Going to be a freshman, you're the little guy. Like the seniors have respect for you, but you're not as much of a peer. So to get involved, try to get to know upperclassmen. I play on the club volleyball team. I've met a few upperclassmen that are just some of my close friends, which is a cool experience. But I think McQuaid also, with all the different personalities and characters we had, got me introduced and ready for college because I was already in a setting where everybody was comfortable with each other, everybody was friendly with each other. So going to college, I was already ready to meet new people. I was socially acclimated, ready to make new friends and make new experiences.
So Donnie, talk a little bit about, I'd like to kind of hear, a lot of students are trying to figure out if they want to go to community level sports. And a lot of times, people talk to them about just be ready for it, time commitment, it's like a job, as well as your job is to be a student. Talk a little bit about maybe what your experience was approaching baseball at Bonaventure, and then also how you're handling basically what your time commitment as an athlete as well as a student. How you do scholarship.
Well, at first, I mean, as I remember saying that I wanted to go to a bigger school, so I just expected to play club baseball at these schools. But since, as people may know, Bonaventure is a small Division I school, so I figured I may try out for the Division I baseball team just to say I did it. And I was fortunate enough to be the only walk-on ever to make the roster. So I am grateful for that opportunity, but with that came a whole different technically a ball game for me, because at first, with me just being there as a student, was just normal, go to class and get your work done and be ready for the next class. But once I started baseball practice and having to go to workouts, I mean, it really made me change my schedule up, because like I'd go to the library for an hour or so and work on it at this time. Then once baseball started, I had to go to practice for 2.5 hours, and then I'd have to figure time to go eat, and then I had to work on my homework. So if you want to be a student athlete, you got to know that you're going to have less time than you think, because you have to. It's all like academics are always first, as the coaches will tell you, even though you want your sport to be first. But academics will always come first, because without it, you can't play. So for me, balancing the academics and the athletics is similar to McQuaid. I played baseball here all 5 years that I was here. So it's honestly the same thing, where you kind of got to go to practice, come home, eat, balance your work so you're not overtired for the next morning. So basically it hasn't been a huge jump for me personally, because I'm kind of used to it, but being in college and being on your own, you got to be able to space out your time and be able to work out, practice schedule, when am I going to do homework, when am I going to have free time, do whatever I want, stuff like that. So you got to know that what you're coming with, especially if you're going to go Division I or if you're going to go Division III, it's all going to be the same thing.
no matter where you go.
So Matt, can you talk a little bit about what you as a student here at Quaid did, whether taking advantage of resources or personally, even time management or discipline that you had that allowed you through like even junior and senior year for you to be not just surviving in your freshman year of college right now, but actually thriving and doing well?
I would say, like Donnie brought up, it's strange coming from a place where you're in school from 8 to 3 for so many years of your, like, probably what, like 15 years of your life maybe, or like 13. And then suddenly you have these big gaps in your day, and it's easy to just like let those gaps in your day just like go away. It's easy to just wait until your next class. But really, I think utilizing those gaps is the key to opening up free time later in the day, time to exercise or do a sport or an extracurricular. So I would equate that to when I was at McQuaid, my senior year, I took essentially a self-study math course where, you know, there was no instructor. I took it online. So I was responsible for the work all on my own, and I had a designated class period to do it. So I could fill it out between then or flex or at home. And so it kind of got me used to thinking of, you know, I should do this now, you know, so I don't have to do it later at home, or I have stuff that I need to do now, so I can just do this later at home. It got me used to prioritizing, essentially, which is pretty crucial when you are the only one that's responsible for freely managing your time.
Before we go to question and answer, is there anything else you guys would like to share that you thought of while someone else was speaking? Anything about majors? I know a lot of guys that were in the college fair portion today. I had several people tell me that what they left me thinking they were going to go study. This many months in, they've already changed their major. Andrew?
Yeah, so I am at a school where basically everybody knows what they're going to be doing already. Marquette, even though it's a liberal arts university, is very much dominated by the sciences. So most people, especially in the honors program, which I'm in, are either like biomedical sciences majors or engineering majors, which means it's like we got doctors and engineers. And I have not yet declared a major. I'm pretty sure I know what I want to do, but I don't really feel the need to declare a major until like I really have to. And I think that's one thing that's really important to understand going into colleges. It's good to know what things you're interested in, but you don't have to know what you want to do. And that was part of my problem with my college search, is I had no idea what I want to do, and I still have no idea what I want to do with my life. And that's okay. But don't let your not knowing or think you know limit what you're going to do in the future. Because if you decide, oh yeah, I'm going to be a doctor, so your junior year, I'm going to be a doctor. You're going to get there and you're going to get those first few pre-med classes, and you're either going to be like, yeah, this is exactly what I want to do, or like a lot of people, you're going to be like, wow, this is really difficult. I'm going to stop trying to be a doctor. Because that's what like the pre-med curriculum does. It's designed to weed kids out. So it's not like becoming a doctor is a bad thing, but don't set yourself so hard on something that you're closing a lot of other doors in an effort to do that. And I think that's really what's helping me a lot. If it matters, I'm planning to double major in history and philosophy with a French minor.
I just want to touch on something that Andrew said at the end, which is so I have a friend at Holy Cross who is very set on doing something, basically physics, and right now she's taking physics, chemistry, biology, and calculus. And those are her 4 classes. She was a very good student in high school, hoped to get a 4.0, ended up getting like a 2.8 maybe. There comes a time at which you have to know your limit, because the classes that you took in high school are not the classes that you took in college. I find that in terms of preparation and time management and writing and reading, things like that, college is easier than McQuaid. However, there are certain classes that the workload, when paired together with other classes, is just going to be too much. And like Andrew said, sometimes you may not be doing what you know, sometimes it may just be too difficult for you. That's not what you should be doing. And other times it's just that it's a matter of kind of balancing them out so that you're not overwhelmed, like my friend is. Yeah.
Anyone have any questions? We've got some faculty members and Grace is with our presence here. Any questions for you guys?
Riley, you said she.
It's crazy, man. There's girls there.
My question is, it's been 4 or 6 years. How's the adjustment going to college and all of a sudden there's girls in the classroom again?
So intimidating.
It's so weird.
No, it's actually I was talking to Mrs. Pietropoli about this morning. It is certainly different because obviously we talked about like brotherhood for the past 6 years. It's a different kind of, there really isn't that sort of brotherhood. I mean, obviously you can have very close friends within your friend group that you feel that close with, but it's not like a campus-wide thing. The girls in class, there are certain things you can't say. You know, with girls in the room, there's certain things that you could say at McQuaid that because you need to be a little bit more mindful of who's around you. But it's a change, but I think it's also a good one. I didn't really have a problem with it. I was very focused. I think we heard in high school that it's good with an all guys high school because you can stay focused. Now that there are girls in college, I think despite that, I still maintain that focus. So now it's not like they're distracting. They're just kind of there. Yeah, I mean, they're good. They're doing fine. Yeah.
Anybody else?
I know, I walked into my first college class and there was a Quaker professor before, so.
I had
What class is this?
Sociology.
No, I actually had a similar moment to that. In terms of like interesting situations like that, I was required to take a seminar for my honors program, and it was a 1-credit course, and I took food, politics, and gender because that's all stuff I'm interested in. And I walked in, and lo and behold, there were 12 students in the class, and I was the only male in the room. So not only was the topic area very different from anything that you will ever cover at McQuaid, because frankly, McQuaid doesn't really cover anything like that in any sort of vein. But the learning environment was very different, and that was probably the only class that was a very interesting adjustment for me, just because I was in such a different environment. And I think that's one thing you think you got it, like you're coming from McQuaid, you're so used to what you're doing, and then you hit college, and it's like very, very different in many ways, but that way as well.
And also for me, I think because the way the St. Bonaventure dorms works, it works by wings. So on the same floor, you have males in one wing and females in another wing. So you're all living together, basically. You're all going to class together. So you're going to see each other every day, every night. And it's different being in class with a girl, but living with a girl is like always being there is a very big change. But as the class standpoint goes, as Riley was saying, they're kind of just, it really didn't affect me much. They're just there. But and for me, enjoy the time while you're here, because you're gonna, honestly, you might miss the time that you have with your brothers here, because you can do a lot more things here than, as Riley's saying, you can say things here that you couldn't say anywhere else. So enjoy that, and because it's gonna be a big change once you move to college.
Put that on the billboard. You can say things here.
Yeah, say it.
Actually, in a little bit of contrast, Notre Dame has single-sex dorms. So I actually did kind of retain a similar experience. You know, we don't have fraternities on or off campus, so it's kind of like the dorms are their own tight-knit communities. There's a lot of dorm loyalty. So in that way, it is kind of the same. Obviously, it's not exactly the same. And I'd like to talk a little bit about what Andrew was saying about like the classroom environment and just how different the classroom environment and your learning environment are, because really that's the big difference, or has been the difference for me. I ended up with really, I guess one of my 5 classes followed like the standard classroom archetype. I had 2 discussion groups. I had one like class, and I had 2 lectures that had like, 70 plus people, and that's not even the biggest lectures that there are on campus. And, there are some campuses with even bigger lecture halls. So it's really different, not only trying to get used to a different type of being taught, but a lot of different types of being taught. Whether it's a discussion group where, the students are leading most of it, or it's a lecture where there's little to no interaction between students and the teacher inside of class. Also, the learning environment, like I said, is very different. It's kind of like it's flex all the time, almost, would I guess be the most appropriate analogy for a McQuaid student, because there's a phenomena that we talk about called fear of missing out, which is the idea that there's like always something going on in your dorm, and it makes it very difficult to concentrate at certain times. But there's one thing that you have to recognize is that at McQuaid, you might have like 2 or 3 kids that have like most of the same classes with you, or a good amount of the same classes with you. In college, you have like an individual responsibility. Probably nobody else takes the same classes as you. And so everybody else, if they're out in the hall, like, playing games or doing whatever, they probably don't have the same homework that you do. So you need to recognize your individual responsibility. And like, yeah, obviously there's times to socialize, but there's always going to be something going on. So that's just part of the environment that you live in and that you have to work in.
Actually, Matt talking about managing work like that reminded me of like one of the things when people ask me how college is, the general thing I tell them is it's just like a lot of work. I think like you think McQuaid is a lot of work, and it certainly is, and it definitely was for me, but college is a lot more work. Like, I don't think it's harder. Personally, people ask if McQuaid prepared you very well, and I think it did. McQuaid did a really good job preparing me for college. I didn't think college was that difficult, but it is a lot more work. If you do the work, you'll do fine, but you just got to commit to doing it. I probably do 20 to 40 hours of work a week for my classes. And the work that I do is certainly different from the work of somebody doing a different major. I know a lot of my friends who are going to be engineers or pre-med, they're doing lab work all the time, and they're writing up 20-page lab reports on like a weekly basis, whereas I'm reading probably 5 to 6 hours a week per my history class, and then writing probably a paper or 2 a week for that. But it just depends, and like, it's not harder, it's just more stuff. The material moves a lot faster, you don't meet every day. That's the change you get used to, is managing your work, and if you can do that, you'll be successful.
I have a question just about assessment. McQuaid is very test heavy. There's a lot of tests and quizzes and things. What do you find that there's a difference in the college environment in terms of how you're assessed and graded?
Definitely, yeah. I took international relations this past semester, and we had a midterm and a final, and that was it. So the class was mostly reading, and then we had lectures of 200 people. So, like, I started off before the midterm. I was on top of my work because I had just started, and then I go into like the discussion sections. I realized like I don't have to do all of this reading, so I kind of slacked off a little bit, and then it became a lot more difficult to prepare for the final, like not having constant tests and having a cumulative final like that. It was difficult. So definitely staying on top of reading is important because you only have 2 assessments per semester.
McQuaid obviously had just test quizzes every week, but so I took 4 classes first semester. 3 of them, the only test or quizzes I had were a midterm or final. Everything else was papers, whether it was a weekly paper or major papers that came every few weeks. McQuaid was in many cases was very objective in its examinations. Holy Cross, most of my professors were very subjective, which can be tough. Especially, you've probably heard about professors having that their opinion in terms of grading matters, and it absolutely does. I was telling Patrick earlier, I had my lowest grade, ironically because it was one of my best subjects, ended up being English, in a 200 level writing course, and that was because one of the papers that I wrote on went very much against the professor's, his ideas and his ideology. So that's something, I guess, to keep in mind, to forewarn that grading can be very subjective, depending on what professor you get.
My classes, I took 5 classes first semester, and they were all very discussion-based and discussion-oriented, which worked out really well for me because a huge part of our grade ended up being class participation. And there were a few classes I took at McQuaid that you got a grade for class participation that factored well into your average. But going to college and having all my classes, like 20% of each grade being class participation, really helped me because I'm somebody that I wasn't always like the best test taker, but I can talk it out, and I'm much better learning like when somebody's talking to me one-on-one rather than writing notes and studying those notes. So I think the different ways of learning at McQuaid, like you can try to work those into your college class load and workload, and it'll help you be successful.
I think I had a little bit of everything in terms of assessments. Some of my classes were very test heavy, like for example, my philosophy class was 4 tests. The first 3 exams were 20% and the final was 30%. And so that was like relatively frequent as far as college level testing goes, and then basically a pop quiz every single day in that class just to make sure everybody was doing the reading. Whereas my history class, we had no sit down exams. There was never an exam that we sat a traditional test for. We wrote a paper probably bi-weekly, and a lot of it was actually film-based. So he would show us parts of a film, and then we would have to write a film analysis on other stuff, and that was work-intensive. And then some other ones I had, trying to think, just like maybe 1 or 2 exams and then a bunch of papers. And I think that was a nice taste. I got a little bit of everything that way. And I think it really varies. Like, I think your major matters, because I know my friends in the sciences have a lot more actual exams than the papers.
One of the big things here past couple of years has been the schedule. I don't know if you remember the schedule. Block days. Thinking back on it now, did the block day schedule help at all when it came to transitioning to college? Because you go from, when you were here, 4 days of 50-minute classes, then an hour and 15 for 2 days. Now it's 8 days with 2 days. We're on a 10-day rotating schedule. Did having that hour 15 help you as you transition? Because I think a majority of colleges are still Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 50-minute, Tuesday, Thursday, an hour and 15, if I'm right. Yes, no, I mean, was that did that end up being a positive for as much as the faculty and staff heard about it from students, how much they didn't enjoy it? Or
It did for me, because like we had, like our last year, we had 50-minute classes, and then the block for a minute, like at Bonaventure, they have 50-minute classes and like an hour and a half class and Tuesdays and Thursdays. So it's basically the same exact schedule. So I was able to space my time out a lot easier because I was so used to McQuaid and the workload that I was given with the amount of time that I had to do it. So it definitely prepared me personally at Bonaventure because the schedule was so similar.
I think especially the part of the schedule was the fact that, at least, I don't know what it is now because I know it's been changed, but the fact that 2 classes would drop, knowing in the back of your brain that you don't necessarily have to do the work for a class because it's not due tomorrow, whether it's due in 2 days or a weekend, after a weekend it might be due on a Tuesday or something. That's basically the same in college. So whether your classes meet on a Tuesday, Thursday, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday, your work will not necessarily be due the next day. So it wasn't so much the time period of the classes, but rather that your work was not necessarily due the following day. And kind of that time management and getting that down so you don't procrastinate too much was, I think, a good preparation for college.
Patrick Will DePasquale from Ohio would like to hear about the DC nightlife. He said here as we're streaming live here on Facebook.
Of course he would. That was one of the biggest, not the nightlife itself, but DC was one of the biggest factors in determining where I would go. I really liked having a campus that was its own contained campus, but within a larger city. So the Georgetown area is really nice for walking around. We go to M Street where there's a lot of shopping and like cool restaurants down there. So I like being able to go out into the wider city and experience some of those things. For Will.
I can second that. Marquette is very much in this middle of Milwaukee. The campus, you can tell when you're on campus, but you can also tell that you're like very much still in the city. Like you go 2 blocks one way off the main thoroughfare of campus, and you're no longer really on campus. And I think it's really great. I didn't actually, when I was applying to colleges, I didn't want to be in a city. I didn't even visit Marquette before I applied, and I didn't visit until after I had accepted. And I think being in a city was really good for me because I never lived in a city, and it teaches you new ways to like think about your environment, but also gives you a lot of opportunities that you wouldn't have otherwise had. I've gotten to go to do a lot of interesting things, like for example, there were a lot of protests around the time of the election. I've met some really interesting people who have lived in the city for a long time and who can tell me a lot of interesting stories, and I think that being in a city really links you up with a lot of interesting people. And I know for me, I like music a lot, and there's tons of opportunity when you live in a city to go to good concerts and, you know, meet cool people.
A lot of you guys mentioned in the beginning just when you got your start in terms of college essays and recommendation letters and those things. But my question is whether you can take me back before then to that moment you kind of just realized college is something you got to think about, and just when you got your start, what you did from there.
I don't remember the exact moment, but the advice I would give you is that it's never too early to start. It's always good to get the ball rolling earlier than later, because if you get it done earlier, you're not going to have to worry about that your senior year, because you might not know this yet, but you get a lot of work your senior year, the first semester especially. I certainly wasn't prepared. I was prepared for it, but I wasn't expecting it. So me getting the college admission stuff going in the summer was really beneficial for senior year. Being a student athlete, as I know you are, I would highly recommend that you get it started sooner rather than later. It's never too early to start.
Yeah, I would second that. I took a college prep course this summer going into my junior year, I think. And I wrote a college essay as part of that course. And that actually ended up being the essay I used for my application. I wrote an essay and I was like, probably won't even use this. And then I wrote a bunch of other essays over the summer before my senior year, and I was like, these are all garbage in comparison. And I ended up sending the one I wrote, and I got a lot of comments on that essay saying that your essay was really interesting to read. My essay wasn't even really about anything about me. I wrote it about why I like books. But it was, I think, that having that start was really important for me, because I think a lot of the burden of a work in an application is writing an essay that you really think reflects you and you know, you're proud of and you want to send to schools. And I think if you can get big things like that out of the way sooner, it's very, very helpful. And then I ended up working on I filled out the Common App in August before my senior year started. So when fall rolled around, I was ready to send my applications by like early October, like way, way, way before the deadline. And that took a lot of the pressure off.
Also, I would keep in the back of your head, I would keep a little list of teachers you would be interested in asking for a recommendation, and keep a running and good relationship going with them, because you never know what teacher you might need to write a good recommendation for you.
That college prep class that you talked about, is that the one you guys talked about in the beginning with Mrs. Bowles? Is it? Or?
I didn't take that one with Mrs. Boers, but I would highly recommend Mrs. Boers. I've worked with her in a few things, and she's a wonderful teacher and a very good writer. So that's one thing, if you want to do something in-house, definitely do that. The one I took is offered through Nazareth College. I think it's called like Camp College Prep or something corny like that. Two guys who work with my mother teach it. John Seraphin and John Baines. It was really good. They're both very talented and they know their stuff. So, yep.
McQuaid offers a summer
Yeah, I was gonna say, I took, this past summer, I took over in Mr. Gordon, so we now teach the McQuaid College Essay course. We sort of picked up where Mrs. Boers left off, very similar program.
When will we find out about that?
We send that out usually, towards the end of the second semester, as soon as these guys settle in on the dates, they offer usually 2 sessions.
Yeah, exactly. And one of them will be earlier, one will be in July, and then maybe the other session will be held a little bit later.
It'll be kind of a first come, first served. Absolutely.
Okay, a lot of you mentioned that you had sent your applications to a handful of schools. You didn't get accepted like you thought you may have. Do you feel that the schools you were originally looking at were really the right fit for you? And you weren't just trying to get into school because of the name or the prestige? Do you feel like you really looked for the school that was the right fit, and perhaps if you had done that, maybe you would get in more, or you'd have more options?
Yeah, I started out with a list of probably 10 schools that I just made probably beginning in junior year, just any school that I could possibly go to. And then I trimmed that down, just thinking like, could I actually see myself at this school, or do I want to apply just because I think it's a good school? So I ended up with a list of like 4 or 5 schools I was going to apply to. And I thought about, I mean, I don't even know if I should have applied to any more schools after I heard back from Georgetown, because I knew that if I got in there, I was probably going to go. But I wanted to just keep my options open to see maybe, just to give myself a chance if I changed my mind. But yeah, I definitely, I cut my list down quite a bit, and I think just based on if I could actually picture myself on campus at those schools.
And with that, looking at the website, even that, sometimes looking from one website to another, you kind of get a feel before you step on campus.
Right.
Imagining that would.
I think visiting was big for me in seeing that. I didn't get a chance to visit all the schools on my original 10, but just kind of thinking, like I said, I wanted to go to a Jesuit school or be in a big city. So a lot of those schools didn't really meet that criteria, so I just ended up taking them off the list.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly identify what you said, because actually, come to think of it, a school I did not mention earlier, the one that I applied to was Penn. Like, I applied to Wharton, and I literally applied to Wharton because it's Wharton. Mr. Allen can tell you about it. I put before I took the SATs, I just had schools on there that were on my list because of their name. And then, especially after the SATs came back, I was like, time to cut down on some of these. And before that, I found myself, what I did was I had my list, and then I would justify why I liked the school because of its name. So I would come up with reasons why I liked it, just so I could keep it on my list. Whether it has good extracurriculars or it's in a nice place. And then it wasn't until about the summer before senior year that I was like, I should and fit into. And obviously, like I said earlier, I just got lucky that Holy Cross happened to be one of those where I ended up. So I would say it's very tough to find that intangible feel. It's a lot harder than the statistics or the name or kind of a school's history. But it's, to me, I mean, I think these guys agree with me. The feel and that intangible vibe is a lot more important.
Would you agree that part of that intangible feel, several people have said it, but the college visit?
Yeah.
A lot of times, if I were to say to you, are you looking at being in a big city? Well, I don't know. I've never been on a campus in a big city. So the first piece of advice would be, go to a campus in the middle of a big city and hear those experiences, right? So you know what you might want.
Yeah. Personally, building off what Riley was saying is, I thought I wanted to go to UVA. That was on my list. I ended up visiting fraternity bid day, which was very interesting. And I realized it was a beautiful campus and obviously a great school. And I realized pretty quickly that it didn't fit what I wanted. It looked like a lot of fun and it was an awesome place, but it was kind of in the middle of nowhere. And after visiting, I realized there is no reason that I should be applying. And I want to see whether I could get in, because it kind of still appealed to me, but I knew I would never end up there, so I just didn't bother.
On that same note, my sophomore and beginning of junior year, I focused my college search on playing college volleyball, and I was very interested in doing that. And one of the schools that I was interested in, and they were interested in me, was NYU. And I went down to a visit to NYU, met with the coach, and went to the campus. And NYU's got a great name, and it's a great school, but I just would not have fit in there. It was not for me at all. The campus itself was very scattered and urban. Like, there was no real set campus, and it just didn't feel right to me. And like at that point in my college search, I kind of realized like I need to take a different direction. So I think it's really important to visit, because if I hadn't visited NYU, then I might have ended up there. Might have ended up somewhere that I didn't really go.
On the topic of visits, I think visits are extremely important, and if you can do them, do them. But for me, the school I ended up going to was not an easy visit. Like my mother and I flew there to visit it, and even to visit wouldn't have told me all of the things that I would have liked to know about being there. For example, just visiting for like 2 or 3 days doesn't give you an adequate idea of what it means to be living in the Midwest, which is something I wish I had known before I had gone there. Because I found out real quick that it's fine, like a lot of people live there, it's great, but it's not for me. I'm very much an East Coast kid, and I'm ready to come back already. It's been 1 semester and I'm ready to come back. That being said, I'm relatively happy with my decision. But I wish I had shot a little higher in my college search, and I'm already making plans to come back east for grad school. So I think that visits are extremely important, but there's always some sort of aspect of uncertainty about anywhere you're going to go, that you're not going to be able to know everything before you get there. And it's okay to want to transfer. Like a lot of people I know do end up transferring, and they end up finding the school. Usually when you change your transfer, everybody I know who has transferred has been really happy with their transfer decision. So do everything you can, but just know that you're not going to be able to get everything. You're not going to be able to be 100% confident that you know all of the things that you want to know.
Any other questions?
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
When do the boys have access to Naviance?